CataractCoach.com, curriculum lesson number 13. More details about Phaco Chop. Now, I appreciate you paying attention here and looking at these videos for the curriculum series. It's a great way of getting up to speed with the basics of cataract surgery. And we've progressed beyond the basics now. We're beyond divide and conquer. We're beyond stop and chop. We're here learning Phaco Chop. Now, I'll be frank with you. Of the last 22 years of teaching UCLA residents, less than half of them could learn Phaco Chop during residency. But you're different. You care about learning every day. You subscribe to Cataract Coach videos. You spend 5 minutes a day watching this guy explain to you how to operate, right? So you are driven enough to learn Phaco Chop. And let me tell you one thing. I know precisely 0 surgeons who have mastered Phaco Chop who then go back and say, well, no, even though I've mastered Phaco Chop, I prefer divide and conquer and stop and chop. No. For the vast majority of their cases, they do Phaco Chop. It's much more efficient, uses less energy in the eye, it's safer, it's a better procedure. It's what I'd want done in my own eye. So I want you to learn Phaco Chop. Don't give up. You have the ability to learn this. And let's continue today with more new videos teaching you some subtleties, some details about Phaco Chop because you are determined enough to master this. Let's get started. CataractCoach.com, Phaco parameters for efficient cataract surgery. So these are my typical settings for routine cataract cases. Now I get asked all the time, can you please share with me what are the Phaco settings used for this case? As if there's some magical numbers that you don't know about. And the important point is, do not ever ask me that if you have not already been to CataractCoach.com and you haven't studied the 10-part series that we have about Phaco fundamentals. I've already explained everything to you in that 10-part series. I assure you, at about 4 or 5 minutes of video, that 10-part series is about the best hour that you'll ever spend on improving your understanding of Phaco settings and parameters. But of course, I get it. You don't want to do that. You don't want to invest the time. It's not worth spending the time to invest in your own future. Okay, let me tell you about the settings in this case then. Now, the first thing to keep in mind in any kind of fluidic settings is, what's the tubing size? Meaning, if I was going to drink a milkshake through a very skinny little cocktail straw, I need really high vacuum and I'll get really low flow, right? But if I use a very large bore straw, I could use a much lower vacuum and get much higher flow. So all the fluidic settings they'll tell you about don't make a lot of sense unless you're using the exact same Phaco tip I'm using. And you'll see in this case, guess what? It's not a 2.2 tip. It's a 2.75 tip. Why is that? Well, there's no difference for me astigmatically because I make a nice incision. There's a lot more flow. So here in the chop setting, what am I using? Flow is 40 or 45 cc's a minute of flow. I'm using a vacuum level of at least 400, if not 500 millimeters of mercury. And then we're using an infusion pressure of about 80 millimeters of mercury. Now, the reason I have to have a higher infusion pressure is we're aspirating the fluid out a lot quicker. Look how fast this happens. This video is shown in real time. Yes, in about 60 seconds, the nucleus is gone. Just like that. So in order to operate at this level and this efficiency, I need to have a higher flow and therefore a higher inflow of fluid to make up for that. And so that's the fluidic balance. So cortex removal, similar. I have higher vacuum here now. You can even go to 600 millimeters of mercury, but a little bit less flow because we can't aspirate the fluid as fast through that smaller tip on the IM probe. So maybe have a flow of 35 cc's a minute. So these are all reasonable settings here. Now put the lens in the eye. At the end of the case, what do you want to do? You want to wash out all the viscoelastic. So think about it. What do you want to change your settings? Yeah, of course you want high vacuum. But to wash things out, you want flow, high flow. So I'll do a flow here at the end of 60 millimeters. I'll do a flow here of 60 cc's per minute And that high flow rate will help wash out the viscoelastic. Of course, keep the vacuum level high as well. That's very important because you want to vacuum out all the viscoelastic that's remaining there. But you really are doing a bit of a power wash, and that's why you need the higher flow rate. So that's it for the settings. There's no magic there. The technique is far more important than the settings. And if you have an understanding of the settings, then you can choose your own settings more appropriately. And so in case you're going to ask, let me tell you about the Phaco power. I just use a little bit of torsional energy, very low, and then I use an occlusion mode. So when the machine sends occlusion, it ramps it up to a pulse mode where I can include some longitudinal ultrasound as well at a high pulse rate, and that's the case. CataractCoach.com. Slow motion of combo chop. This is an easier and more efficient version of chop that you can learn. Let me teach you. So let's start off with showing you the rexus. Now you see the left side of the screen, the 1x, this is in real time. Now I have to show you the capsular rexus because to do this technique, you really need to have a 5 millimeter to 5.5 millimeter diameter capsular rexus. Do not make a baby capsular rexus. If you have a 4 millimeter capsular rexus, you won't succeed with this technique. So now we're going to do hydrodissection. Now watch carefully. There's a fluid wave going around the backside of the nucleus, another wave tapping the center, a little bit more. And let's see, can we spin the nucleus? Yes, it spins. You remember, if it does not spin, you will not win. Now we'll get the Phaco probe ready. A little tiny dab of viscoelastic there in the center to protect that central corneal endothelium. Here's the Phaco chop mode on the machine. High vacuum, high flow, 400, 500 millimeters of mercury. And now watch where we place that Phaco probe. Subincisional area, embedded, achieve high vacuum, push the chopper into the nucleus and spread, hold the one half out of the way while you bring up the second half. And now we can go around and chop it. And I want to show you the complete nucleus removal before we get into the slow motion. So you see, the eye kind of stays in primary. Those three light reflexes, the Purkinje image on the cornea, they stay basically in the center, and that's important. We're pivoting our hands and our instruments within those incisions to keep the eye in primary. And we take out one half of the nucleus first, and then we can remove the other half as well. Now we need that 5 millimeter capsular rexus in order to bring out an entire half. Now you could sub-chop this within the bag into quarters, but let's just do halves. And then you can bring a half up like this, and now that can be sub-chopped very easily. So again, the Phaco parameters are going to be a high vacuum, 400 or 500 millimeters of mercury vacuum. The flow, I like about 40 cc's a minute, so things happen in a very efficient manner. And you need to have a sufficient infusion pressure. So if it's pressurized infusion, at least 75 millimeters of mercury during this portion. If you're doing a just bottle height or gravity fed, at least 100 centimeters above patient eye level. And you can see nucleus is moved in just a little bit more than a minute. Nothing to it. Let's watch that one more time. There we go. Embedding it, this is real time. Chopper goes into the nucleus too, and now split, and then propagate that chop, hold one piece away while the other's brought up. And let's show you that same step again at half speed. Probe goes subincisional, not the center of the nucleus. High vacuum achieved right there. Now the chopper is embedded in the nucleus within the rexus. Instruments are brought together and now apart, and one more push apart to really propagate that. Now hold one nucleus half out of the way while the other half can be brought up, and now it can be sub-chopped as well. Let's watch again in 1/4 speed now. So where's the Phaco probe going? Not the center of the nucleus, subincisional, just inside that temporal rexus. Embed it till you have that high vacuum, high on the machine. Now, when you have that high vacuum, quickly, without wasting time, embed the chopper within the nucleus. Just push it towards the optic nerve. Now, two instruments are in the nucleus, bring them together and apart. And here you can see there's the crack, and you can propagate it all the way through. Now the left hand, the chopper is going to hold one nuclear half out of the way to create a little bit more room. And we can bring the first nuclear half out of the capsular bag. And there it is. And once it's partially up in the anterior chamber, chopper can go around it, and we can sub-chop it again. So that's the key move. Watch this video a few times if you need to. And then let me show you one more time in real time. Phaco probe embedded. High vacuum now. Chopper embedded. Instruments come together. apart. There are the two halves. Hold one nucleus at bay. The other half is brought up, and that looks great. Thanks for watching these videos. Be sure to check out the website too, CataractCoach.com. You'll get the full text and the graphics and the photos, plus the videos. And if you sign up for a free daily email, we'll send all of that to you in your inbox every day for free. Come on. CataractCoach.com. Check it out. CataractCoach.com. There's no need to hook the lens equator. You can simply place the chopper within the capsulorhexis and into the nucleus and still achieve the chop. Let's watch it first here in real time, and then I'll show it to you in high magnification and slow motion. So place the chopper into the nucleus. Watch carefully, not under the rhexis, within the rhexis. Bring the instruments together and apart. And now we've achieved a nice chop. Two halves are created. Now rotate the nucleus, and here's we can do it again. Buzzing in, chopper goes into the nucleus, and just separate them out. Traditional horizontal chop requires you to place the chopper under the capsulorhexis and go out to the equator of the capsular bag so you can hook the lens equator. Vertical chop keeps both instruments right there in the center and changes the force vector to a more vertical one. This is a combo chop. It's kind of a little bit of both. Let's call it the best of both worlds here. And so we can very easily chop this nucleus that has moderate nuclear density. Very easy to chop. And we can do that while keeping both instruments, the phaco probe and the chopper, within the capsulorhexis. Now here at the end, we can bring it up. This is more of the horizontal technique, going around the lens equator. But that initial chop, and even the subsequent first quadrant chop, were done by just placing the chopper into the nucleus, within the capsulorhexis. No need to go under the rhexis edge. And it works very efficiently. You can see the nucleus can be removed in, a minute or so. Very, very stable technique and very repeatable. This is a nice way to learn chop. So I call it combo chop. It's been described by many other surgeons. This is nothing that I've invented. So we see that's very efficient and very safe. Now let's watch it again. I'll show it to you in higher magnification, and then we'll repeat and show you in slow motion. So again, phaco probe here in high mag, you can see we're placing it just inside that subincisional capsulorhexis. The chopper is pushed into the nucleus straight down, and then bring the instruments together and apart to create two halves. Really nice. Now let's watch it with slow motion. This is at 1/3 normal speed. Look, we pushed the phaco probe in, the chopper's pushed in, two instruments are brought together, and there we split it apart, and you can see two halves are achieved very nicely. A little extra separation to make sure the halves are freed from each other, and now we can go on to sub-chop the rest of the nucleus. So let's resume here in normal speed, and you can see it's very easy to do this technique again, pushing the chopper right into the nucleus, split that, and there we go, you have quadrants. This is just a repeat with higher magnification, a replay here, so you can understand the technique. And now, notice how the chopper at this point just pushes the pieces in front of the probe, keeps them in the correct position. So we can rotate it around, let's get that other quadrant out, and then that last half will chop again. So make sure we have good separation, there it is, bring this quadrant up, right about the iris plane. We don't want to ride the endothelium when we're doing this. You want to be just at the iris plane and taking that down. Now the last half, I'll show you a traditional horizontal chop, which is chopper going around the lens equator. And then now you can break off a quarter, and then the last quarter is in the capsular bag. And then notice how we keep the eye in primary the whole time. And then the chopper is being used now to push that last piece in front of the phaco probe, so pushing it. And now the back end, the smooth side, the curved side of the chopper is going to be facing the posterior capsule. Just in case there's some surge that we weren't planning, we don't want that posterior capsule to come in contact with the phaco probe. And then that looks great, taking out a little bit of an epinuclear shell there, and there's the last little piece. So very nice technique. You can certainly learn this. It's just not that hard. Let me fast forward to the end of the case here and show you what it looked like. And now you can see there's the rhexis. I want to show you this part so you can see that it's a 5mm capsulorhexis. It's a 6mm optic. And you can see that lens is beautifully centered. That looks great. Seal up the incision here. This was a bare minimum amount of phaco energy, a very efficient case. Very little fluid was placed through the eye. Remember, it's not just about the ultrasonic energy. If you run 500 cc's of fluid through the eye, you're going to really surprise and hurt that corneal endothelium. So you want to minimize the surgical fluid that's used during surgery, the BSS, the amount you run through the eye. And that looks great. So try this technique. I call it combo chop. We have many videos here in Cataract Coach, and I think you'll learn to do this technique quite well. I know you love the YouTube videos, but check out the website, CataractCoach.com. A lot easier to navigate. We have a complete list of articles and videos. You can go and check on any of these categories and explore more. You can also search. There's a search engine that's really effective. You can see Gore-Tex lenses like this. And finally, you can look up about me. There's a link that has my surgical instruments. Now you don't even have to ask me. You can just find out for yourself. What's the name of those forceps? CataractCoach.com. This is why I just need one single chop. So for my average cataract case, just one chop is really enough. So let me show you the case. The first thing we're going to look at is the nuclear density. So this patient has a typical nuclear density for our Beverly Hills clinic. And if you look here, that's about 2+ nuclear sclerosis, maybe 3+. And this technique of just one chop works great for that density of nucleus. And the second thing is the rhexis. In order to get a heminucleus out of the bag, we need to have a sufficiently large capsule rhexis. Now, if you make a small rhexis, let's say 4.5 millimeters in diameter, you can divide the nucleus or chop it into quadrants and take each quadrant out of that smaller capsule rhexis. But if you want to get a whole heminucleus up, you need to have about a 5 millimeter rhexis, like we just tore there. And that's going to allow us to bring a heminuclear fragment out of the bag, a whole half. So now hydrodissection is important to free up that nucleus. We'll tap the center there. And you really want this nucleus to be able to spin a little bit. So we'll try spin it. And there it is. It's got good spin to it. So you know it's free from the capsular bag attachments. Now here comes the one chop. We'll put a little bit of tiny aliquot of dispersive viscoelastic in that central cornea. Now I'm going to go and bevel down. I'm going to do a combo chop. And we're going to split the nucleus in two halves right away. So phaco probe goes in, chopper goes in. And now look as the chopper will help split the nucleus. And now the chopper's holding the one heminucleus out of the way to create more of a gap, as the phaco probe in the vacuum level brings up the second piece. So one nuclear half is in the bag still. That's on the left side of your screen. And the one that the phaco probe is attacking now is kind of at the iris plane. And you can see you don't have to do much more chopping. You can simply occlude the tip, use the ultrasonic energy to help break it up, and just like that, one nuclear half is gone. Second half comes up out of the bag, and same concept, no further sub-chopping is really needed. So just one chop is all it takes, and just like that, the nucleus is out, and we're done. So that's kind of the trick behind it. So good. 2 to 3+ NS, check. Second thing, it's going to be the rhexis, it's got to be 5 millimeters. And third thing is, after I do that one chop and separate the two halves, the chopper pulls the one heminuclear piece out of the way to create more of a gap that allows me to bring up the other heminuclear half using the vacuum of the phaco probe. And once that's gone, then it's very easy to remove the other piece and proceed from there. So that looks great. Now cleaning up the rest of the capsule here, taking out the cortex, a little bit of capsular bag polishing. And again, this makes for a very efficient surgery. You can see little black ink marks on the cornea, the limbus. Those are at the cardinal meridians. And if you look carefully, there are already some marks on the cornea and the corneal epithelium that show us where we're going to line up this toric lens. And so delivering the lens is going to be our next step. Capsular bag is full of dispersive or cohesive viscoelastic. Here you go. Here comes that lens being delivered. It's going to be a single piece acrylic lens here. This is an EDOF lens, extended depth of focus. This would be an Alcon Vivity lens. And you can see it's also the toric version, so we'll get that lined up. See the toric marks at the haptic optic junction. And I'm going to rotate that a little bit, and our marks on the cornea are just about at the 90-degree meridian. So that's where we're going to line the lens up. So, of course, first removing viscoelastic from behind the lens. You want that posterior aspect of the optic to sit directly on the posterior capsule. No viscoelastic, which is going to be slippery between the two. And now I can clean up more of the anterior capsular rim now that I have the IOL weighing down and holding the posterior capsule away. Now it becomes a lot easier. Now you can see there are the marks on the cornea, very close to those two horizontal black marks. And we'll rotate those lens haptics around so we can line up the 3 dots of the toric IOL with the 3 dots on each side at the cornea. And you can see that's a really good alignment there for both the marks. And then even the Purkinje images are beautifully centered in the middle of that special optic. This is an optic that has a beam shaping element in the center, and we want that lined up with the first and fourth Purkinje images. Very slight hydration of the main incision. You don't need a whole lot of it. Next, look how the rexus overlaps and captures the optic. So for sure, that's about a 5mm capsule rexus. And again, judging by the optic size at 6, and you can see it's a beautiful overlap for 360. So everything here looks pretty good. The end of the case here, how about some triamcinolone? That's about 0.5 to 1 milligram preservative-free. And then we'll put some moxifloxacin as well in the anterior chamber. That's preservative-free for endophthalmitis prevention. And then finally some balanced salt solution, get the pressure where we want it, and we can check that and everything looks great. Sealing up the incisions here at the end, they've already been hydrated. We can get the pressure where we want it, and then we'll put a wax cell here with some tetracaine and then try a dry wax cell. And those are my secrets and how I can do just one chop for a routine cataract case. CataractCoach.com. I tried to chop it, but it's just too mushy. It's too soft to chop, so how can you remove the nucleus now? Let me show you this case. Here's the capsular rexus, normal 5mm, looks fine. This lens doesn't have too much nuclear density. You can see it's primarily a posterior subcapsular cataract. So we'll do some gentle hydrodissection. Now, my normal method in a soft lens is to do some hydrodissection, hydrodelineation, and get the nucleus out of the capsular bag. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to leave it in the capsular bag to show you how to deal with a mushy nucleus that just won't chop. So here it is. There's the mushy nucleus. You can see it's just a indistinct kind of blobby, gooey stuff. Putting the Phaco probe in there. We're on chop mode. High vacuum, high flow. Let's try chop it. And we go in and it's just mush. There's a little bit of a chop, kind of, but it's kind of mush. They don't really chop. Now be very careful on a soft lens. When you go in there, if you go in with high vacuum, with high Phaco power, you can buzz right through the nucleus and boom, hit the posterior capsule. You obviously don't want to do that. So what are we doing now? I need to get the nucleus out of the capsular bag. Primarily vacuum. Don't give energy here. Control that foot. Just vacuum on the pedal. And see how we're rotating the nucleus and trying to bring it in. Still didn't get it. A little bit better. There's a little bit of a break. Trying to get the instruments around that. Try again. Finally. So we're using the vacuum to draw the cataract nucleus away from the capsule and keep it central. And as best as we can, we want to bring this lens material, this nucleus, out of the capsular bag, away from the posterior capsule. That's our safe zone. Be very cautious. If you give Phaco energy right now, it'll go right through that nucleus and right through the capsule. You heard that click sound. That's the sound of sadness. Don't have that. So now I've gotten most of it freed up, and I'm just going to stay at the iris plane. The chopper is just keeping the pieces at the port, at the tip, and the chopper is also in that safety position so you don't allow the capsule to come forward. And let's just clean all this up, and that's how we resolved this. Now, in this case, listen, it's soft enough. Let's not be crazy with the Phaco probe. Let's switch to the IA probe, because the IA probe has that soft polymer tip that's far more gentle on the posterior capsule. Remember, you're a professional. You're in private practice with a very fancy clinic here. You cannot risk a broken or ruptured posterior capsule. That should be a very, very rare event for you. Maybe 1 in 1,000. So we got to be very cautious and stay away from the capsule. And look, we can just use the IA probe to finish cleaning up. And now the case looks beautiful. So yes, the mushy cases like this, there's a reason why. If you look here on Cataract Coach, I tell you, get that nucleus out of the capsular bag. If you can get it out with hydrodissection or hydrodelineation, that's even better. So here we go, empty capsular bag. Let's fill it up with our cohesive viscoelastic. Let's put that lens inside and see what we got. So filling up our bag, good, good, good. Looking very nice. Like that rexus, here comes the lens. And again, remember, for those keeping score at home, how's that draping doing? Draping is looking pretty good. And you need to have the same thing. You got to hold yourself to a higher standard. Don't submit me a video with eyelashes everywhere and gooey gunk on the teeter film. And no. Start with the basics. Fix that first. All right, here's the lens in the capsular bag. It goes. Let's rotate it a little bit, get those haptics open. Beautiful looking case. So again, what's the take-home point here? You got a mushy cataract, a soft cataract. If you can't get it out of the capsular bag, you're going to have a hard time breaking it in half or chopping it in the capsular bag. Divide and conquer is not great for a very soft lens. So what you want to do is the technique that was shown here, review it if you need to, and that is using higher vacuum without phaco energy to hold on to the lens material and bring it centrally and hopefully bring it outside of the capsular bag up to the iris plane where you can very easily emulsify it. Now, if you can't control your foot because you're a newbie surgeon, that's okay. And you say, well, every time I try to go down, I inadvertently hit phaco power. Switch the machine to cortex mode. Then there's no position 3. It's position 1, irrigation, 2, aspiration. Still have the phaco probe hooked up to it. Or go on your energy settings on your phaco and put that to 0, and you won't have that issue. But this is a case that you must know how to handle. I know you love the YouTube videos, but check out the website, CataractCoach.com. A lot easier to navigate. We have a complete list of articles and videos. You can go and check on any of these categories and explore more. You can also search. There's a search engine that's really effective. You can see Gore-Tex lenses like this. And finally, you can look up About Me. There's a link that has my surgical instruments. Now you don't even have to ask me. You can just find out for yourself. What's the name of those forceps? CataractCoach.com. More nuclear density means more chops. A denser nucleus should be chopped into more small pieces. Let me show you this. Now, doesn't look like too much nuclear density because the red reflex is so good. Remember, we adjust the microscope lighting to achieve that, plus I alter it here in post-production to really give you a better view. We'll make our main temporal incision here with a diamond keratome. This patient has a sufficient degree of nuclear density. This is about 3 to 4 plus nuclear density. So, incision looks good. I like the little bit bleeding there at the limbus. That tells me that it's a good incision that's going to heal well in the long term. Now, with a denser lens, don't make a baby rhexis. Do not make a 4mm rhexis. You know you like to do that sometimes because you get afraid. But have the courage, have the faith, make that 5, or even better, 5.5mm capsular rhexis. That's going to make it a lot easier to get these denser nuclear pieces out of the capsular bag. So there's that rhexis, looks fantastic. Let's get some hydrodissection. Now you'll notice more of the nuclear density here with that hydrodissection. Fluid waves going around. And let's again make sure the nucleus spins. Remember, if it does not spin, you will not win. Hey, you knew it. Good. So there's the nucleus. Got some good density, a little bit more viscoelastic to protect that central endothelium. Let's get the phaco probe in here. So chop mode, high flow, high vacuum. So at least flow for me is 40 cc's a minute. Vacuum is going to be 400 to 500 millimeters of mercury. Infusion pressure of at least 80 millimeters. Buzz in there. Chopper goes around. Boom. There's the 2 halves. And you can see there's some density in this thing. So make sure I separate it out, bring the first half up. And now I won't just wolf it down, I'll chop off a small piece. Let's take that piece down. Beautiful, nice and easy. And now we'll buzz into that same quadrant or heminucleus actually. Buzz into it again, and let's chop it again. Let's get another chop going. There's another chop. So we keep chopping off little pieces from it. And it's a lot easier and more forgiving to operate this way. Let's do another chop even. So that first half was chopped into 4 small pieces, each about 10 to 15% in size. So total is 50%, and we got about 4 pieces out of that. So now here comes the second half. Let's rotate that around, use the chopper, get into a more advantageous position, buzz in, and notice we don't buzz in the center, we buzz in the side of it just to break off a small little quadrant. Or even smaller than a quadrant. So when that small piece is broken off, it can be emulsified down, and then that last piece is going to follow pretty easily. You can either just wolf it down or chop it further. Here's yet another chop just to make you guys happy. So again, a smaller piece is a lot easier to aspirate here. So when you have a patient with more nuclear density, that means more chops. You saw the previous video we put just before this. I think it was video number 1108. In that video, we say, if it's moderate nuclear density, then just one single chop is all you need. But in this patient, where there's more nuclear density, you need multiple chops. So we have the initial chop to break it into 2 heminuclear pieces. The first heminuclear piece was broken up into 4 smaller subpieces. The second piece was broken up into maybe 2 or 3 small pieces. So a total there of 6, 7, 8 chops, which is very typical. So it's much easier to work with smaller pieces if you have a higher nuclear density. And we can still keep the total energy placed in the eye as very low. This patient's still going to have an absolutely clear cornea on post-op day 1. So now we're just cleaning up there. Look at that empty capsular bag. Let's fill it up with our cohesive viscoelastic. We'll finish up this case. Again, this is another series of my complete cataract cases. And these complete cases are the entire case start to finish. And this is a pretty good looking case. And I encourage you, if you're just starting off, if you've done fewer than 1,000 surgeries, you can achieve this. It's just hard work. If you want to achieve it, tell me, how hard do you want to work? So let's deliver that lens into the capsular bag. Looks pretty good. My technician's spectacular. She's loaded that up perfect every time. And now let's just get that lens into position, open up the haptic. You can see this is a small hyperopic eye. This lens power is 24.5 diopters for a plane of outcome. And you can see that rexus looks great, overlaps the optic. But this is not a very large or big myopic eye. You can see that 6mm lens, that optic diameter, 6mm, that looks pretty big in this eye. So the total dilation there is about 6mm. And again, our rexus there is about 5 to 5.5. We'll clean up that viscoelastic, and at the end here, get that lens very nicely centered. And then cleaning up here under surface of the anterior capsular rim, just to get some of that lens epithelial cell material off that area. That'll decrease the inflammatory load as well. If you inadvertently grab the iris like that, just let go. You'll be fine. So you can see the Purkinje images. You guys know this by now. What is that? The first and the fourth Purkinje image. And that big blurry stuff down there, that's another Purkinje image, right? Which one is that? If you don't know, you better look up Purkinje image on CataractCoach.com. So that looks great. Sealing up the incision the right way, not causing a ton of astigmatism, which you don't want to do. Notice how we don't whiten the side walls of the incision like an amateur. We're not amateurs here. We're professionals. And now angle sweep there to wash out any viscoelastic. Looks great.